welcome to Addicted to Murder. This is Courtney, licensed professional counselor with over a decade of experience.
And this is Trisha, and my mom would like to have a ranarium.
A ranarium?
Ranarium.
That sounds fun.
Well, maybe I think she would. I don't know. I'll have to ask her after this episode. It's a frog farm.
Oh, that does sound fun.
She loves frogs. And everyone knows it, so then she got way too many frogs souvenirs.
Uh-huh,
Like,
yeah.
have you ever had that where everyone knows you like something and so you get a shit ton of things?
Turtles.
Turtles?
I mean, I still love turtles, so I'm not going to say no, but yeah. I got a lot of turtle things for a while.
And then some of them are cute and some of them are like, do I really want this?
Yep, pretty much.
And it's, mine was mermaids.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You do have a lot of mermaid things.
Still. And I've gotten rid of, they broke or something like that. They were all gifts, but yeah. I'm not much of a collector of things.
I'm not really an intentional collector of things.
Are you a hoarder at all?
No, not really. I'm pretty good at throwing stuff away.
My boyfriend's a hoarder, for sure. He doesn't like if it works, if there's any sort of nostalgia attached to it, it stays.
That's like my dad. My dad has a little hoarder in him.
Yeah. Why is that? Why do you think people are like that?
Well,
And some people aren't.
yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to like healthy attachments with others. And so like people who have a hard time with hoarding often like have a hard time giving up attachments or like feel just like a more profound sense of loss than other people do. Like even if it's something small, like it's just more intense.
Do you think that hoarders are more often in divorced children families?
I have no idea.
I'm just thinking because that could be like a broken attachment. I'm just trying to think of what's different between me and Chris.
Right. Sometimes it's trauma related. Hoarding is considered like an obsessive compulsive disorder.
Gotcha.
So there's definitely some sort of anxiety attached to it. So
Interesting. I never watched those hoarder shows, but I hear that
I love those shows.
Yes. Makes sense.
Yep.
By the way, Courtney just listened to me rant for like 40 minutes. So she might be a little tired of listening to me talk, but we're gonna plug along because we're in part 4.
It's okay. I didn't have any clients today, so I had some extra empathy for you.
Well, and before when you came, I'm like, I'm not even going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it. But then I saw you and I had to talk about it.
That just kind of happens to me.
Yeah, I can see why. She's very easy to talk to. People.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
Since that's what I do for a living, is be a person for people to talk to.
It's true. But yeah, so we've got part 4, and I'm sorry if you guys wanted this to be wrapped up, but it's going to be 5 parts. The book that we use goes kind of really detailed into so much of it that it was hard for me to like pick and choose what not to put in, so it's going longer than normal.
But it's all interesting stuff, so it still will be an interesting episode.
Yeah, I mean,
and an interesting episode 5.
I think episode 5 will be really, really, really interesting, and we're going to try to get a lot done in that one.
Right.
Yeah. Before we do part 4 and the recap, will you ask me a question?
I will.
Okay.
So I'm going to keep it kind of really simple today.
Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yes. What is your favorite ice cream and ice cream topping combination?
Cold Stone. Have you ever had Cold Stone?
Yes.
They used to have a cake batter ice cream. I would have them mix it with Heath bars and gummy bears. Which sounds weird, but they're good to me. And then hot fudge. I will eat hot fudge out of the jar cold. I love hot fudge. Like it better than ice cream.
It is pretty amazing.
Yeah. What about you?
I'm a little more simple, but I love a good like strawberry ice cream with hot fudge sauce.
Strawberry chocolate.
Yep.
You can't beat it.
Nope.
I love chocolate covered strawberries.
Me too. And it's just like eating that, but in ice cream form.
Yeah. I like that too. I like strawberry out of all of the fruits of the ice cream world.
Yeah, strawberry ice cream is the best of the fruit ice creams, in my opinion.
Like in Oregon, huckleberry is a big ice cream flavor.
That's true. We get a lot of like Marionberry stuff too.
And Marionberry, yeah. But I still, strawberries are the best. So, yeah. All right.
Well, I might get some ice cream today. After I eat it. I have to go to the store anyway.
Do it.
Yeah.
And some hot fudge.
Sounds good.
Do you want to just do a recap, just like the quickest of recaps, because we're already into 4 episodes, so that'd be a really long recap.
Yeah. So we've been talking about Mr. Jeffrey Dahmer, who felt neglected and rejected by his parents growing up, did some weird stuff with animals, did some weird stuff in high school, including being an alcoholic from a young age. And then he was actually abandoned by his parents, had his first kill. Then he tried to go to college and failed out. And then he tried to join the military and was discharged because he was an alcoholic. And then he moved in with his grandma, killed a bunch of people, and then eventually moved out and continued to kill people.
Yep.
There we are.
Here we are, and here we go. So as we left off last week, Jeffrey met a young Laotian boy named Southome Synthansamphone on September 26th around 3 in the afternoon. He was on his way home from school as a freshman. Dahmer approached him on the corner of 25th and asked him if he would pose for him for $50. Here is what he said at the trial. Quote, he asked me what school I went to and how old I was. I said I was a freshman and that I was 13. Then he said he was asking other kids if they wanted to pose also. I asked him if this was his career, and he said no, it was his hobby. He asked me if I wanted to go along with him to his apartment, where I would pose and he would give me money, and I said yes. We started to walk to his apartment. We got there after about a block or 2 walk. We went into his apartment. He asked me if I could strip so he could take the photos he wanted with no clothes on. So Southome resisted Jeff's suggestions that he take his clothes off, but eventually Dahmer pulled his shirt up to his neck and started taking Polaroids of him while he was lying on the bed with his shirt up. Quote, we stayed in the bedroom for a little while, and then he offered me a drink. He asked if I wanted some coffee, and I said yes. Then I followed him into the kitchen where he was going to make the coffee. I watched as he put water from the faucet into a pot and boiled it. Then he poured the coffee into cups. He put a chocolate-colored cream-like substance in the coffee. Then we went back to the living room. He took a little sip of coffee, and then I drank about half the cup. He said, why don't you just finish it? And I drank the whole thing. So after the coffee, they went back into the bedroom where Jeff tried to get him, to take off more clothing so he could take more pictures. Jeffrey got aggressive at this point and pushed Southome further than Southome wanted to go. So he freaked out and said he wanted to leave. And Jeffrey said he'd like to listen to people's stomachs. He then listened to his stomach. Side note, the author points out that Jeff liked to listen to his mom's stomach when she was pregnant with David. So this kid started to really freak out. He was also feeling the effects of the drugs that were in the coffee that he had drank. He was able to get out the front door with his $50, and he got really dizzy, but he luckily made it home. He went to bed and passed out. He woke up in the hospital. The police had been called and interviewed the young boy, who pointed out Jeffrey's apartment and also identified his mugshot. On January 30th, 1989, Dahmer was convicted of second-degree sexual assault and of enticing a minor for immoral purposes. He would be sentenced in May. Courtney?
Well, I see, during this time, Jeffrey is acting more impulsively. He's making more mistakes. This boy was able to describe his whole MO perfectly, as well as identify him. And really, I don't really understand why he was not held in jail while awaiting sentencing. That feels like a poor decision, but maybe a quote like gay sexual assault didn't seem like such a big deal at the time, or was like minimized maybe. But regardless, this could have been the end of the story right here.
Yeah, I thought that was weird too because, I understand that they let people out on bail before they're convicted.
Right.
But he was convicted, and why was the sentencing so
far away?
Yeah, that's bizarre. I mean, granted, I have been to one court case, but the sentencing was the next day.
Right, not 4 months later.
Yeah. Well, while they were waiting to sentence him, Dahmer procured another victim. On March 25th, 1989, Jeffrey met 24-year-old Anthony Sears at a club. Anthony had aspirations of being a model. Jeffrey may have caught wind of this. The two started to talk at the club. Anthony was with his buddy Connor, and he wanted to keep the party going, so Jeff invited him over to his house. Connor offered to drop him off. And that was the last time he would see his friend. He dropped them off near his place, near Jeff's place, but he didn't tell people exactly where he lived. He could be busted that way. In this situation, it looks like Jeffrey actually took Anthony to his grandmother's place instead of his. It could be that he was worried that the cops were watching his apartment because of, his conviction. He then performed his ritual of sleeping pills, strangling the victim, waiting until his grandmother left, and then disposing of the remains. He did deviate a bit with Anthony. Jeffrey found him attracted, so he kept the skull, boiled the skin off of it, and then painted it gray and put it into his apartment. It looks like he's keeping pretty big trophies at this point.
Yeah, almost like he's falling back into his old habit of collecting animal bones when he was a child.
Touche. Mm-hmm. The next part of Dahmer's tale is his sentencing for the assault of the 13-year-old boy. The state argued that Dahmer was a danger. If he was let off lightly, he would surely be dangerous in society. On the other side, they argued that he was a poor guy who was addicted to alcohol and would not be able to seek treatment if he were in jail. The state wanted a sentence of at least 5 years in prison for Dahmer. Quote, Mr. Dahmer's version is simply not the truth, and that gives me a great deal of concern about his insight into his problems and his ability to work on those problems as an outpatient within a community setting. So the attorney stated that his therapy for the last arrest was not effective, and he was just going through the motions. He had a facade of a very cooperative and receptive appearance, but anything that goes below the surface indicates the deep-seated anger and deep-seated psychological problems that he has, that he's completely unwilling or incapable of dealing with. The doctor who met with Dahmer said, quote, the defendant could not have been less cooperative, that he didn't delve into his problems at all, that he denied that he had a problem. The other strain that is constant throughout the reports is the strong predomination of anger and resistance and evasiveness that Mr. Dahmer has displayed, and also his willingness to be very manipulative. Anything, Courtney, before we go on?
I mean, I think the doctor and the prosecuting lawyer were right on.
Yeah.
Even when he's explaining later about his crimes, there's a lot of him not taking responsibility for it. Mm-hmm. He's very good at, finding ways why it is not his fault, whether it's, if I wasn't drinking, then this mm-hmm. wouldn't be a problem, or if this person hadn't done that, then this wouldn't have happened. And so I think we can see some of that. I hate to associate borderline personality disorder and manipulativeness, mm-hmm. But there is kind of that big part of it of trying to be whoever is around him wants him to be.
Well, I appreciate you not wanting to put those mm-hmm. two together, but I think that if you look up borderline personality disorder, a lot of people think they're super manipulative.
Right.
But we're not all.
Not all.
But yes.
But Dahmer was.
For sure. The defense argued that he was an alcoholic in need of services. He did not belong in prison. He asked for a long suspended sentence for Dahmer. Lionel came and asked the judge for leniency for his son as well. When Jeff spoke for himself, he admitted that he was an alcoholic and a homosexual, and he had sexual problems. Quote, I'm an alcoholic. I'm not the sort that has to have a drink every single day. Right. But when I do drink, I go overboard. The prosecution has raised very serious charges against me, and I can understand why. What I've done is very serious. I never meant to give anyone the impression that I thought otherwise. I've never been in this position before. Nothing this awful. This is a nightmare come true for me. If anything would shock me out of my past behavior patterns, it's this. Please give me a chance so that I can tread the straight and narrow and not get involved in a situation like this ever again. I can't stress enough that I desperately want to change my conduct for the rest of my life. This enticing a child was the climax of my idiocy. It's going to destroy me. I'm afraid. This one incident, I didn't know what in the world I was thinking when I did it. I know I was under the influence. What do you think of this, Courtney? The convictions he does have, what do you think should be his punishment? And do you buy that argument? Or, what he just said.
So I think that Jeffrey's claims about being just a poor alcoholic who has now been shaken out of his old ways is total BS. Mm-hmm. His previous arrests were for minor offenses, albeit of a sexual nature and involving underage boys. So I can see how, officially on the record, he may seem to be reformable, but Jeffrey knew that he had already killed multiple people at this point. despite stints in rehab and therapy. So I think he was full of shit, essentially.
I think that his the way that he presents to the judge and is trying to be like humble and all that is a little different than a lot of the other killers that we see. And maybe it's the borderline versus narcissism that makes them present differently, because he does seem a little more pathetic.
Right.
And maybe a little more believable. And he is taking account or acknowledging what he did.
Right.
But he is blaming alcohol for it.
Yeah, and I think it ties back into that doctor's description of him as, on the surface being all compliant, but like not willing to go any further than that.
Yeah.
I think his whole statement there is a perfect example of like he's saying all the right things, right?
Yeah, he's intelligent.
But he's also either intentionally leaving some things out, or he's in denial of how big his problems are. But just in general, my views on sexual assault, particularly involving minors, are that it deserves strict sentencing. So
yeah,
I would throw the book at him if I was a judge.
Well, Judge Garner sentenced Jeffrey Dahmer to 5 years in prison on the sexual assault charge, but put him on probation for those 5 years. He was required to spend 1 year in a work release program through the House of Corrections to complete therapy, basically. On the other charge of enticement of a child, he got 3 years in prison, but that sentence was stayed. He got 5 years of probation that would run concurrently with the other 5. So, and he was not supposed to be around juveniles, or where they might be. So basically, he was convicted, sentenced to 5 years, but his 5 years was going to be pretty much freedom. I mean, that first year he was like on kind of like a house arrest program in a state-run facility.
Right.
But he still could go to work and get out. What do you think?
Exactly. I mean, this sentence, it seems very inadequate to me for, what he did and was convicted of. He essentially just had to, like, sleep in jail and then go live his work life. I think it was really a wasted opportunity by the courts to potentially save some people's lives.
Right. I mean, it's easy for us to say that hindsight, but again, with the type of crime and his previous sexually motivated crimes.
Right, exactly.
Some jail time, like real jail time, might have been called for.
I think so.
At least, yeah. The judge stated that he didn't have a lot of faith that Dahmer would improve. Quote, "I could send you to prison and you wouldn't get any treatment for the problem. You'd come out probably worse than you are right now. You're going to repeat because it's a drive. It's almost a biological urge that you have. This is the kind of thing that the prosecutor would just ask the judge to throw away the book. But if there is an opportunity to salvage you, I must make use of that opportunity." I wouldn't want to be a judge.
It would be so hard.
Right. Because you're supposed to you're supposed to try to be fair and like give people chances and stuff. But then when this happens, I bet that judge feels like shit.
Probably. He's probably like, maybe I should have listened to my other instincts.
Yeah. All right. Well, whatever. That happened. So Jeff starts his 12-month sentence, like the 12-month where he's in that house. He was supposed to stay in the correctional house when he wasn't working. So he worked nights. So during the day he was there, and at night he still went to his shift at the chocolate factory. His army training served him well in this prison setting because he got up in time, he made his bed, he was home by curfew, he was, good at following the rules. He was miserable by the lack of freedom, but I don't feel bad for him. And he was seemingly starting to hate minorities more and more. So per the book, he expressed to another inmate how much he hated black people, and he wanted to kill them when he was released. Dahmer claimed that during his time here, he was being raped by black members of the prison on occasion. Maybe this contributed to his growing hatred if it's true. It's irony at play since he had already murdered or assaulted 5 members of that race. Jeff got in trouble one time in prison. He had a furlough to go to his family for Thanksgiving, and he came back smelling of alcohol, which is not allowed. He failed a sobriety test and stated he had drunk a quart of whiskey that day. He was reprimanded by taking 2 days off of the good behavior days that he had earned. What happened on that day is unclear. Dahmer said he was so ashamed to see his family that he got drunk instead, was sexually assaulted, and woke up in a meat packing plant on a hook dangling there. He said he was extremely ashamed and angry at having had this happen to him. Dahmer would end up serving 10 months of the 12-month sentence, but he did not do the alcohol recovery program that he was supposed to have done. What are your thoughts?
You know, I have some doubts about his story of being assaulted, at least while on leave. You know, I think it's possible that he said this happened to him to try and gain some sympathy from the warden and get a reduced punishment. I mean, I try to go along with, you know, when people say they've been sexually assaulted, believe them. But it's kind of hard for me with him, just given his history. But, you know, in general, I'm also not surprised that he did not complete the alcohol program because he doesn't actually want to get sober.
Yeah, alcohol programs don't work if you're not wanting to do them.
Exactly.
It's just like going through the motions.
Right.
When Jeffrey was released, his family members claimed that he was an obviously changed man and not for the good either. Sherry said in an interview later on, quote, "Something happened to him in prison that he would never talk about. We all know what can happen to a child molester in prison. He had no light in his eyes. Jeff lost his soul in there. He said he'd never go back to prison." Jeffrey's probation officer required that he meet with her twice a month. He was supposed to enter into an addiction program. He was not to be around minors without permission, and he was supposed to speak with a therapist specifically about his issues regarding his sexuality. He was not supposed to drink alcohol, ever. He found a new apartment and moved himself in. Apparently it was in a really bad neighborhood. It did not take him long to get right back into the bar scene and to encounter another victim. On May 29th, 1990, he met Raymond Smith, a.k.a. Ricky Beeks. Dahmer offered Ricky money to take photos, have a few drinks, and watch a movie or two, and Ricky agreed. The author points out that after prison, Dahmer changed his routine. He did not try to engage in sex before he served the laced cocktail anymore. He now just served a laced cocktail to get the victim incapacitated. No more taking chances of them escaping is my guess. He then strangled him, removing the clothing, and in another new twist of his routine, performed oral sex on the body. He then dismembered him. He also decided to keep this skull and followed the cleaning procedure to preserve it. Courtney?
Well, I guess you could say he did learn his lesson from his time in jail, at least learning not to take unnecessary risks with his victims. But also, just as you were talking, I was thinking about it. If, you know, Jeffrey really did experience being raped in prison, I wonder if that could have impacted the way he chose to do things from then on, knowing what it feels like to be sexually assaulted.
Like you're maybe thinking he has some sort of sympathy for his victims?
A little bit, maybe.
Huh.
Like, because he knows, like, how much it hurts or, like,
Scary.
how scary it is. And so perhaps he, in his own way, was trying to spare his victims some kind of additional pain.
Yeah. Maybe.
Just a thought.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good thought. We won't ever know, but because he's different than a lot of our killers. The fact that he laces their cocktails and stuff already points to the fact that he's not like necessarily getting off so much on like terrorizing his victims before he kills them.
Right. That's never been a thing for him.
Yeah. 2 weeks later, he met Eddie Smith. Dahmer performed his ritual, and during it, he took Polaroids of the whole process. Eddie's family filed police reports. They said that at first the police seemed concerned, but once they learned he was gay, their attitudes changed. The family took it upon themselves to put up flyers and conduct their own search. His sister claimed that a month after Eddie was reported missing, she received a phone call in which the caller told her, quote, "You don't have to bother about looking for your brother." And when she asked the caller why, he said, "Because he's dead." She asked the caller how he knew that, and the caller responded, "Because I killed him." Well, Jeff targeted a minor victim next, a 15-year-old who was living with a foster family. On July 8th, Jeff met the boy on the street and invited him back to his house for the usual ritual that he does. The boy came back to his home and let Jeff take nude photographs of him. He then decided he wanted to leave. He probably got a bad feeling because the change in mood was abrupt, per Jeff. Jeffrey had run out of cash and didn't have sleeping pills, and so he had a mallet that he was going to start to use on his victims. He's going to knock them unconscious that way. He smacked the youth on the head and stunned him, and he began to scream, begging for his life, and he said he wouldn't tell anyone if he just let him go. He and Jeff got into a physical fight. The child wasn't drugged. Jeff was worried about the screaming and so elected to let him go, but threatened him that if he told anyone, he would get him. The boy was put into a cab where he went to his foster family. As soon as he got home, he told his family what happened, described Jeff, and was taken to a hospital for evaluation. He reported the incident to the police. He gave them the address and the name Jeff, but guess what? There was no follow-up. Courtney?
Well, I mean, this young man was a foster child, likely gay, and had willingly, quote, willingly, gone with Jeffrey and allowed him to take nude pictures. So he was like the epitome of a victim that would be ignored and written off by the police at this time. But again, another opportunity where they could have stopped him and didn't.
Yeah, I mean, and they might have just not straight up not believed this kid's story at all and didn't even look up the name. I mean, he didn't have the name Dahmer, but he had the address and he had the first name Jeff. If they had looked into it at all, they would have seen that he was on probation for assaulting a young minor child.
And is not allowed to be around minors.
Exactly. So, big mess up right there.
Yes.
Another.
Yes.
One of many. On September 2nd, Jeffrey met Ernest Miller. He met Dahmer on the street, and Jeff solicited him for sex. The two went to Jeff's apartment where he served Ernest a laced cocktail. Miller passed out, but instead of his usual strangulation, he stabbed Ernest. I guess Ernest was pretty muscular, and he wasn't sure if he could strangle him before he woke up. Jeff took pictures of all of this. He cut up the body and disposed it in acid. He saved the skull and painted it to put with his others. He, for whatever reason, decided he wanted the biceps, so he cut those away and put them in the freezer. A few weeks later, Ernest's grandmother received a phone call where the caller was making choking noises. Then another phone call came when the caller was making groaning noises, and a third call where the caller stated repeatedly, "Help me." Courtney, any thoughts on the calls? If they were Dahmer, then this is the second victim's family he was reaching out to.
I mean, I can't imagine who else it would be making these calls. Although we do know that sometimes people like to insert themselves into investigations and things like that when they're not involved. But it would make most sense for it to be Jeffrey. And typically, killers call or reach out to victims' families in kind of one of two reasons. First could be, they get a thrill and they get aroused from that pain and suffering that they're causing the family members. And secondly, sometimes because there is sort of an internal desire to be caught. And these phone calls are almost a type of confession. With Jeffrey, I honestly don't know which motivation is more likely. I think it really could be either way.
It's not like Clifford Olson.
No.
Where he was purely doing it to be awful.
Right. Not like Clifford.
Yeah. Jeff met 22-year-old David Thomas, and again, he offered money for pictures. For whatever reason, Jeff decided David wasn't his type. So after drugging him, he killed him, but he did nothing sexual with the body. Dahmer took a break from killing until February 1991 when he met 18-year-old Curtis Strotter. He went with Jeffrey to his apartment to have his photos taken and was given a lace beverage. He performed his ritual, ending with a skull that he added to his trophies. After this murder, for whatever reason, Jeff's biological mother called him out of the blue, which may have had some big psychological effects on him, as it would send him on his final killing spree that would include 8 more victims. Courtney, Jeffrey hasn't had any contact with his mom in 5 years. What kind of things could this conversation do to him? So she had moved to California, and when she contacted Jeff, she told him how she worked with the homosexual community in Fresno, that she knew Jeff was gay, and that she accepted it and loved him. The author speculates that this conversation may have opened up further floodgates of rage that were suppressed for so long. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with the author in this. That phone call with his mother likely did stir up all kind of emotions for Jeff. She was the primary target of his feelings of abandonment and fear of rejection. And so he likely had a lot of suppressed anger, sadness, and shame about his mother's treatment of him and, her eventually actually leaving him. So her calling could have stirred up some of those feelings, but he was not able to express them to her directly because, he still wanted her love and approval. Also, to have his mom accept his homosexuality was probably very confusing for him. His mom was specifically accepting and loving about a part of him that he hated the most. And so I imagine this caused a lot of cognitive dissonance in his mind.
It's kind of, it just sounds weird to me, like that she reached out, that she claims after all this time that she loves him and accept. It just doesn't seem typical of her. Granted, we really only know about Joyce, the bad stuff.
Right. Maybe she went to California and got a really good therapist.
Yeah. Who knows? You know what? I don't know anything about David, so it's not talked about in the book or anything like that. So, I really don't know what Joyce was like beyond what little bit we know about her.
Right.
But yes, I agree. It was probably really confusing, and perhaps was the catalyst for the murders that he commits next that are even more gruesome and
bizarre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, well, that's where we're going to pick up next week, and hopefully that will be the last one. It might be a longer episode, I don't know, but it'll be an interesting one.
It sure will.
If you guys have any thoughts on any of the of any of our episodes, if you have any thoughts, because we speculate a lot.
We do.
On, and we'd be totally interested in hearing opinions. And I was going to tell you, Courtney, before I forget, because I was going to say this at the beginning. This is totally off subject. Mm-hmm. One of my sister's friends that I met last weekend told me about her family's potential encounter with Ted Bundy.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was in the late 70s, I think. Mm-hmm. And they were in the Northwest. I want to say it was in Oregon at the time.
Uh-huh.
And they were stopped at a rest stop or something like that. And a man in a champagne-colored Beetle came up to the car with a cast and asked them for help. And it was two women in the front seat. And it was at that same time that he was active and in the area. And he didn't realize that there was kids in the backseat. And when he saw them, he said, never mind, and turned around and left.
He did end up at least raping a woman at a rest stop, right? In Oregon?
I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure he did. So I wonder if it was the same one.
Yeah. So I asked her, she was going to check in with her mom and her aunt, because I think that's who it happened to, was her mom and her aunt, and get more specific deets.
Yeah.
So Tammy, if you're listening, she's a new listener of ours.
Yeah.
Let me know if I said that wrong, because I thought it was it totally could have been a champagne color. And they know what Ted Bundy looks like. So, I know memory is not something to be totally trusted, but the cast and the car.
Right.
And yeah.
We love stories like that. Mm-hmm. So if you have any stories also, doesn't have to be Ted Bundy, could be anything. Right. We want to know them. Maybe we'll even share them on air with your permission.
Especially, if you give us details.
Yes.
Because I can, elaborate, but that's... Then it's not real. But anything else you want to say before we close up for the day?
No, I think that is a good place to end for today.
All right. Well, everyone stay safe. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye.